Hello everyone, this is Rexer of the YouTube and sometimes Twitch channel NotQuiteThereGaming, bringing you another Warframe build and guide video. This time it's about our favorite, lovely, boom Michael Bay style Warframe, Nova. She has suffered a lot of changes since she was basically the absolute ruler of Michael Bay style gameplay for Warframe. Nowadays, I would hazard to say she is more about the debuffs than the actual explosions, though we'll get into that. Before we get started with mods and then abilities and stuff, we need to talk about the Warframe ability augments that she has available to her, which is going to be a first for this series, because they are noteworthy. They are especially noteworthy. And since I've started this series, now we have 2 per Warframe, so we should really get into it. I used Cephalon Suda to gain access to mine, if I am not entirely mistaken. And we have Neutron Star and Antimatter Absorb. If you don't want to listen to my opinions about these two, please skip ahead until I am at the arsenal, which is the next section of this guide video. So let's take them in order. We have Neutron Star, Null Star Augment. Recasting Null Star will make all remaining particles explode with area damage, which is a blast proc, a guaranteed blast proc, or almost guaranteed blast proc. There are some things I don't like about this mod. So first of all, this mod is about as unreliable as the ability it modifies, which is going to put all my cards up front for you. I don't like Null Star that much. Neutron Star modifies it, and the result is questionable. Why? Well, first of all, some people have been saying that, and they are very correct, that Null Star gives Nova a thing that she has been missing, which is the ability to do instantaneous burst damage. She has Null Star, but those target themselves at whatever they want. She has Antimatter Drop, but you have to charge that. She has Molecular Prime, but you have to trigger that. So Neutron Star would give her a way to do damage instantaneously. Now the problems with Null Star, oh wait, before I get into that, the thing that really captivated me about Null Star was not the instant damage potential, the burst damage potential. It was the supposedly guaranteed blast proc, which knocks down enemies. I wanted an extra bit of crowd control for Nova, and I thought it would combo well with Molecular Prime, because enemies would get knocked down and they would get up more slowly because they are slowed by Molecular Prime. Now in practice, my results in using this have been very inconclusive. So if someone has suffered a blast proc and they are trying to get up, they will not be affected by another blast proc. That's, I suppose, understandable, but sometimes it almost looks like even enemies that have not yet been affected by a blast proc will not be knocked down, so it might be just a high chance blast proc. I am not entirely certain. I have not executed academic level research on this this particular mod, so you might want to keep an eye on the wiki page for this mod to see what people discover after thorough testing. In my opinion, though, it doesn't seem to be a reliable crowd control method right now. I will revisit this later and let you know in an addendum, but that was the main reason why I would have considered this mod. The weird things about Neutron Star, the range at which the blast proc, at which the explosion goes, is about as much or even slightly lower than the range at which Null Star will start firing projectiles. So it causes some complications, because if you have Null Star cast, you have to recast it before it runs out of projectiles. So pretty soon after enemies get into range, you don't really have much time to think about, hey, do I want to cast Neutron Star, do I not want to cast Neutron Star? If you wait too long, you're gonna run out of stars for Null Star, and then you're gonna have to recast Null Star, and then you're gonna have to recast Neutron Star, and then it's gonna take too long for it to be really worthwhile, in my opinion. The instantaneous damage itself is not something that really draws me. I usually prefer to shoot things if I want instantaneous damage. I like my Warframe abilities to give me a little bit of something extra, something more special, maybe range or AoE or crowd control or something. So that doesn't really interest me that much, but you might want to look into it if you're really hurting in that area. I would not, however, recommend Neutron Star at this time. Going forward, we have Antimatter Absorb. Antimatter Drop Augment. Absorbs energy... Oh, enemy bullets. And someone is calling me. I do apologize. I should have muted this phone. God damn it. Apologies. So, Antimatter Absorb. Antimatter Drop Augment. This surrounds your Antimatter Drop, your little bubble, with... some swirly sort of slashy things. Technical term. They will let you know at what range the secondary bubble of absorption goes to. The secondary bubble of absorption that is caused by this augment will absorb enemy projectiles. You can still shoot into the main bubble of antimatter drop to charge the drop normally with your own damage or with friendly fire, I do believe. Some people say friendly fire no longer works, but I have not tested that. Your own damage does work on the core, the antimatter drop core still, and it works very well, I would say. Now I am in agreement with some theories about this. And namely, you can use this secondary absorb bubble to shield yourself from incoming enemy damage. Now, I have said on numerous occasions that enemies don't actually do that much damage. I find that in Warframe, damage is skewed in this way. Warframes do a lot of damage, the player does a lot of damage, has relatively low health, the enemies have relatively high health and do very little damage. Sometimes there are a few exceptions to these, like infested chargers, for example, but they won't be charging your antimatter drop. Heavy gunners, Grineer heavy gunners, you might run into those. Those could be an interesting source of charging your antimatter drop, but still better to just shoot at it. And snipers. Snipers, apparently they are awesome, like Grineer snipers. I don't really know what they're called. But yes, the point of this mod, in my opinion, is not to have it charged with damage by the enemy. It is to deny the enemy the ability to get damage through the area that is covered by it. So you can use it as a sort of mobile shield. Because of problems with antimatter drop and the projectile not properly slowing as it should, you can't really use it too well. You can't, for example, surround yourself in it, which would have been funky. You can't rely on it for too long. You have to shoot it at a bunch of enemies that are coming at you from a specific direction and charge it while they're charging it as well, and then detonate it at their feet to ensure a kill, because if you don't kill them, you're just gonna get shot again, of course. So the situations in which I would recommend this are when you are able to position yourself in such a way that your enemies are only shooting at you from one direction. These might be few and far between, these situations, but I think it's worth it. I think this mod is worth it, and I'm going to suggest that you include it in your build. This should be it for now, though, for these two mods, and we're going to get into the main build part right now. Doop-de-doop. Okay, time for frame skipping. So, Arsenal, welcome to the first annual bait and switch. No, I'm just kidding. So, I build my Warframes the old-fashioned way. I farm the parts and then I cook them in the foundry. So I have not yet had time to Forma Nova Prime as I wanted to. So we will be taking a look at regular Nova for the mods portion, and then we'll come back to Nova Prime to look at her while we discuss abilities and such. So you're going to see some interesting choices. There's a lot to talk about with modding Nova, so we're gonna have to get right into it and hopefully get done with it fast. So I make no promises. Enemy radar. Enemy radar type effects synergize extremely well with antimatter drop, and I will try to make a very strong case for this in the abilities section. Short of it is, if you can see where the enemies will be before they can shoot at you, you can charge the drop and detonate it before they have a chance to do anything to you. That is one of the main reasons. The second would be that if you know how many enemies are around, you know if you should or should not invest the energy into doing a molecular prime. This applies mainly in roaming style missions, though it has some application in defense style missions and so on, depending on enemy spawns. For example, can you tell already if there are going to be enemies in a spawn area? If so, then you can detonate an antimatter drop on the door itself and just destroy them, because the damage goes through object and such. If you don't like it, replace it with energy siphon, but I thoroughly recommend enemy radar for Nova, especially since she is kind of squishy. Nova Prime is not as squishy as Nova, which is lovely. But it definitely helps in survivability as well, and energy conservation, lots of things. I really love enemy radar style mods, but not always. Now, I opted to go with fleeting expertise and streamline for a total of 75% power efficiency. We're going to be talking about this a lot, so don't take it as set in stone. But as a rule of thumb, Nova benefits from a lot of power efficiency if you want to go caster heavy. Depends very much on your playstyle. There are a lot of ways you can play Nova that are very valid. That's the problem I've had with creating this guide, because there are a lot of ways you can play Nova. It might not look that way, but it's all about which skills you want to emphasize. Transient Fortitude, my newest, mostest, absolutelyest, awesomest, favoritist power strength enhancing mod. We have a this mod is underleveled on purpose. Prime continuity is underleveled because I just couldn't get there yet. This one is underleveled on purpose though, too short of maximum, for a total of plus 45% power strength. If you've read the wiki, you know that power strength adds to the slow effect of molecular prime as a flat additive bonus. So 30% slow base plus 45% slow off this equals a maximum of 75% slow. Done and done with just one mod, no negative power efficiency consequences, and I think this is the best option. We do suffer for power duration, but I don't think it's that big of a deal in the current case, and we have prime continuity introduced into the game, which serves to reinforce that, I would say. Then we have narrow-minded, of course, for extra power duration for molecular prime, and constitution, of course, for extra power duration for molecular prime. The knockdown recovery doesn't hurt either. I chose redirection for my defensive option for Nova because Nova Prime especially has higher base shield values, and she benefits a lot more from the use of redirection. But one thing I found out the hard way, had to relearn the hard way while leveling Nova Prime, is that your Sentinel with, I do believe, the Guardian mod is the one that replenishes your shields when they are depleted. That adds a lot of extra survivability to your shield-based mods. So if you find it weird that I keep proposing shield-based mods and you are just not getting the same amount of mileage, do know that a Sentinel with a shield replenishing mod, or a Kubro, I do believe they have, one of the Kubro types has that ability as well, they help a lot in shield-based builds. A lot. Incredibly much. The difference was literally just heaven and earth. Just sky to the ground, whatever you want to call it. It's a mistranslated Romanian expression. I was getting my ass handed to me without a sentinel because I was doing an operation with a limited conclave rating. I had no sentinel. I was getting my ass handed to me, but when I put the sentinel on again, same mission, it was just, hey, I'm just gonna laugh at you because I can't be killed. Okay, so lastly we also have stretch. Stretch to compensate the range penalty of narrow-minded. Now, a lot of things we need to talk about. First of all, why bother with stretch? Stretch helps primarily with wormhole. If you don't have stretch, wormhole will be a very short range. It's still usable in some things, but it is nowhere near as useful as it could be with just the addition of stretch. If you don't like wormhole, you can chuck stretch. Just chuck it out the fucking window. Pardon my language. Stretch also helps with the explosions of molecular prime, but since we are not focusing on explosion damage, that is a secondary concern. Now the thing is, I want to slot Antimatter Absorb. What am I going to sacrifice in order to slot Antimatter Absorb? First of all, any build you see here, I will reinforce this, any build you see here is probably not Forma complete, because I actually play the game with these Warframes and I try a lot of different things. You will see the Forma complete builds, the links to Warframe Builder in the description of this video. So please look there for specific Forma guides to these builds. We're just going to be talking mods right now. So I want to slot Antimatter Absorb. What do I sacrifice from this build? Transient Fortitude has to be in there. Prime Continuity has to be in there. Narrow-minded has to be in there. The power duration is just too great and we need it for molecular prime. The direction has to be in there. One of these two power efficiency mods have to be in there. Constitution, and stretch. So first of all, the secondary absorb bubble of Antimatter Absorb is affected by power range. So right off the bat we need to keep stretch. So the choice comes to Constitution, Streamline, or Fleeting Expertise. Now you're going to have to answer this question yourself, but I'm going to give you a case for each. So take out Constitution. You are going to lose, I believe, what was it? You can find out the exact specifics of how much duration on the molecular prime wave you lose by slotting or unslotting certain mods. In Warframe Builder you have those statistics on details. It's very helpful. You lose like I think 20 meters on the maximum propagation if you unslot Constitution, but do keep in mind that power duration applies additively, calculates additively and then is applied. So we have 99% plus 28% plus ideally 55% minus 50%. So you sacrifice 30% power duration, but you have an extra slot and you still have the two better power duration mods. Okay? Okay. Now, that is one option. I would not really recommend that though. I would recommend that only if you know you're going to be playing in a very small map and you don't need the maximum wave propagation for molecular prime. It's kind of iffy. You have to try it out. So that leaves us with Fleeting Expertise or Streamline. Now, the first reaction will be take maximum Streamline and take Fleeting Expertise out. You get more wave propagation for molecular prime. And you can just slot Antimatter Absorb in there. I almost agree with that. But I think that Nova uses up too much energy to just make do with 30% power efficiency. I don't feel comfortable with that. I know I would get more wave propagation for molecular prime, but I don't feel comfortable with taking out fleeting expertise. So what I did was take out streamline, leave in 50% fleeting expertise. Sorry, need to do a switcheroo here. Leave in 50% fleeting expertise. Why? Now, the thing is, when you don't rely on energy siphon for your energy, you need to consider a few things which related to the energy bubble cost of each ability, which is something that I have been taught by a forum goer that I do respect the opinions of. So I don't take credit for this, but some people who do rely on energy orbs have been thinking about this for a long while, and you should too if you take this build. So with 50% power efficiency, molecular prime will cost 50 energy, and antimatter drop, I believe, will cost 25 energy, which means it is a energy orb precise build. If you take 30% streamline, for example, those numbers will go out of whack. You will use energy orbs. You will consume energy orbs even when you don't actually need all the energy from them, and that actually leaves you at a effective efficiency that is lower than you think it is. So that is why I chose to go with 50% power efficiency. I find this build works very well. I don't think you really need that much more wave propagation on molecular prime, but your mileage may vary. It depends heavily on which map you're playing on, though you can always recast, and excuse me, even with 50% power efficiency only, you can still do a lot of good recasting. Nova Prime has more energy than Nova, than regular Nova, which means you will have a bigger pool of energy to draw from in order to get those molecular primes off. So yeah, it's up to you which of the mods you want to replace. I will be trying to do streamline only as well, and I will let you know if that is grossly superior. But right now, this is what I'm going with. I also want to spend a brief amount of time to address the negative Nova side of things. Now, the basic concept of negative Nova is you don't take any power strength enhancing mods. You instead take overextend, which lowers power strength, which means that the enemies that are affected by molecular prime are not slowed but hasted. This works very well in specific maps, for example, Orokin Derelict Defense and certain damn it, I forget the name of it. The clan contested areas, dark sectors, yes, in dark sector defense. This works very well, especially when you're doing short 5-wave runs just for the money. Now, the only thing you need to know about negative Nova, or speed Nova as some call it, is you need to take overextend and no power strength enhancing mods whatsoever. Otherwise, whatever. I chose to very slightly modify my main build for this. Obviously, Antimatter Absorb is not useful against infested. They have ranged units now, but they are very few and far between, so it's debatable the effectiveness of it. You might also want to consider doing a streamline only build in this case, because you won't need to recast that often, I would say, but it depends. So I just wanted to touch upon that briefly. You will find a possibly more refined negative/speed Nova build again in the description below after I complete the build on Warframe Builder. Okay, now we're gonna get into abilities. Let's equip Nova Prime again. And again, just so you know, Nova Prime has 25 flat, more shields base, so that brings her to 100 shields base, so that works nicely with redirection. And she has more base power, so 740 shields boosted by the build you just saw, and 262 energy, which is really good. I'm satisfied with those values. If you are an experienced player, if you've played a lot of Nova, you don't really need to listen to what comes next, because I'm going to talk about her abilities a lot. But if you want to, if you're curious about my opinions, I always welcome viewers to watch this next section, which is probably going to be the longest part of this video. So let's get into it. We have Null Star, Antimatter Drop, Wormhole, and Molecular Prime. Let's take them in order. Null Star. I have been told that Null Star staggers enemies it hits. So far I have not seen anything really conclusive to those ends. Either it seems to kill the enemy outright, or I'm way too overcome by lots of difficult enemies that want to kill me, and I can't really notice if it staggers anyone actually. So, operating though on the assumption that the information I received is correct, and this does stagger enemies it hits, it is still not a very good skill, because well, it targets whoever it wants, and I don't like unreliable things. It's just me, maybe. It is an interesting skill to use early on in early levels. For example, if you're a newer player, it is an interesting skill. It is also a viable trigger for Molecular Prime sometimes, if you're not very far along into things. Assuming it staggers, it is an interesting self-defense tool. And if you use the Neutron Star mutator, the augment mod, it could provide you with some interesting crowd control options, but generally speaking, I don't like it that much. It's either just enough damage to kill someone, or kind of negligible damage, and it pales in comparison to Nova's other abilities. Still, if you are able to sustain the energy cost of it, there is no reason to not have it on always. Power duration enhances the number of projectiles that it summons each time you cast it. So that works well with the base build I proposed anyway. So why not? Secondly, we have Antimatter Drop, which, like I was saying, benefits very heavily from enemy radar type mods, because you can see the enemies before they can see you. Antimatter Drop's only real, well, on paper, theoretical weakness, other than bugs, is that you have to charge it. So you have to be safe while you charge it. If you see your enemies before they see you, you can fire off an Antimatter Drop, charge it, have it ready, and then detonate it before your enemies have the opportunity to shoot at you for 3 to 5 straight seconds while you try to charge your Antimatter Drop. The mod that gives you the ability to absorb enemy projectiles, the name of which I forget already, is very useful to create that moving shield that I was talking about earlier. This works very well against Grenier, I find. It works the best against Grenier, because Grenier projectiles are hit scan. You will have a very hard time dodging them. And Corpus, you can kind of dodge their projectiles, it's not that big of a deal. With Infested, you can just move out of the way of their melee weapons, their melee attacks, or try to dodge their ranged attacks, but the Infested are a lot trickier these days than they used to be. Still, this ability with the relevant augment mod is a very, very nice ability. It's a very nice ability, and I find it's very underused by a lot of people. It has the potential to do stupendous, tremendous, unbelievable amounts of damage, which will help you out a lot if you are going for longer defense or survival runs. And if you opt to take that enemy radar, you will still be able to use it in a roaming type setting in a survival mission, for example. Charge it, you know, get it off. Now, there are a few bugs which you will find on the wiki. The worst of which I have to mention, it seems that sometimes if you detonate on the face of an enemy, that enemy will just take impact damage and no AoE will be dished out to surrounding enemies. So you want to slam your antimatter drop, literally drop it onto the ground before it hits any enemies, or you might have some problems with it. This is kind of bad for the augment, because you want to have the augment's area of effect be in the path of enemy projectiles as long as possible to absorb them, to keep you safe. Not to charge it, but to keep you safe. So you will have some vulnerability at the end of the antimatter drop period. So it's not foolproof against very damaging enemies. But yeah, it does a tremendous amount of damage. It's very worth it. Another bug is the projectile is supposed to slow down to let you target it with your weapon and charge it for a prolonged amount of time. 19 times out of 20, if you are the host, if you are the player, I mean the client, it seems to make no difference. This does not happen. And it has been a case ever since I've made my first Nova build and guide. So I don't really mind it that much, because antimatter drop is really good anyway, and I kind of wish it wasn't a bugged feature. I kind of wish it just was like that, because I don't need the slowdown, and I actually don't want the antimatter drop to slow down, because I want it to travel further to be able to explode on farther targets. I don't want it to randomly slow down at an awkward moment. Antimatter drop, really, really good. Augmented antimatter drop, really, really good. You should use it more often. Next we have wormhole. Wormhole, you can... Well, this is a part where I need to speak about my last Nova guide. Now, in my last Nova guide, I advocated a squishier, faster, no wormhole build, which at the time was good, especially, but critically, because Molecular Prime affected enemies instantaneously. So it didn't have a wave propagation, it just affected enemies as soon as you cast it. So any enemies you cast Molecular Prime on were instantly slowed. That's the main thing. Instantly slowed, so their reactions were slower and you could just dodge a lot of projectiles. So I was talking back in my previous guide that wormhole is not that big of a deal. Now that you have it at all times and you don't have to invest a mod slot into it, wormhole it's an interesting skill to have. It can get you into hard to reach places, of course. You can actually do sort of dodge-like maneuvers with it as well. And I'm going to have to go into detail with this. Now you can use wormhole in, I would say, 3 ways. First is a area denial sort of way, which is not very prevalent because it only has 4 charges. But you can drop wormhole on a access point, on a path, on a ramp that you want to deny, one or several wormholes, and make it so that enemies who try to walk up that ramp will get teleported to another location, preferably as far away as possible, not at the bottom of the ramp. So aim somewhere farther than the bottom of the ramp when you try to do that, please. It's funny, it's still funny, but yeah, just aim farther. You can do that, but it's not that prevalent. It's more of a fun tactic. The more useful tactic is to get into hard to reach places. You can get on very high ledges in orc and derelict defense. You can get on top of structures in large ground-based corpus maps, for example. And once there, the enemies will not be able to see you more often than not, but exceptions may apply. And so you can take advantage of that to take a breather, to get some energy, to get some health, to cast molecular prime again, to charge a antimatter drop and send it over the side only after it's charged, so you don't have to expose yourself that much, for example. That is very useful. That is very useful, and you can save yourself from death a lot of times like that. However, because Wormhole has cast time, well, it's not specifically a cast time. The cast time itself is almost instant, but the duration between casting Wormhole and going through it exists. There is a duration there. So don't rely on it when you need a solution right now. It might be too late. But do experiment with using Wormhole to get yourself out of a situation fast. So learn how to move to get that cast to motion delay as low as possible. You can still, and also, yeah, the third way to use Wormhole is just to dodge. I include here also the ability to use Wormhole to move from one area to another, because that is still possibly dodging. Just aim at an area that is far off and go through the Wormhole instantly, and that will obviously take you out of harm's way. You can use that either to take yourself somewhere vertically or horizontally. So horizontally, you can relocate to another point, for example in an interception mission. You can move yourself in a defensive mission. You can just use it as moving faster even. Or you can go straight up. If you go straight up, enemies will lose targeting on you if the ceiling is high enough. If it's not high enough, you just did something useless. So open air maps or Orokin maps with very high ceilings, very good for that. Enemies will lose targeting of you when you're really high. Also, when you're really high, you can consider casting a molecular prime while you're up there. It will not be as fast down as you are with falling, but it will still get a nice coverage and a few seconds of head start in that coverage while you are not taking any damage. So yeah, Wormhole, get into hard to reach places for defensive purposes, instantaneous movement for defensive purposes, area denial, not very prevalent, or let's just say it's 4 categories, or fast movement from place to place. You can use this for in large maps. Excuse me. You can use this in large maps to get around really fast. You can use to help your teammates to get around really fast and such. But it is all dependent on whether or not you like these ideas. This is why I've talked about Wormhole a lot. If you like these ideas, slot stretch. If you don't like these ideas or the augment for antimatter drop, dump stretch and use something else that you like. The important thing about any Warframe build is that it is supposed to cater to the play style of the person playing that Warframe. I try to tell you the builds that I think are that best bring out the strengths of each individual Warframe, but they are also catered a lot to my own playstyles. So always feel free to adjust. And Wormhole is one thing that is going to really influence the way you adjust this build. Also, obviously, If the map in which you play is very small, for example, one of the older Corpus ship tilesets, you're not going to get much mileage out of Wormhole. If you want to get really hardcore, you can make a Nova build for every type of map, small, medium, and large, and tweak everything if you are really hardcore into Nova. That can be done. You can get a few extra efficiency points, so to speak, out of tweaking Nova that much. Lastly, but certainly not leastly, we have Molecular Prime. Molecular Prime has been for a long time Nova's signature ability. It started out as being an instantaneous effect, so you cast it and immediately everyone in its power range will be affected by the debuffs and have the potential to go boom 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 boom, my heart goes boom boom boom, etc. So yeah, that's what made a lot of people fall in love with Nova the first time, because explosions everywhere. It also made a lot of people really mad because Nova would prime every enemy on the map always and then get kill credit for everyone. Yeah, maybe not that team friendly. So they decided to nerf that, and instead of power range affecting how far Molecular Prime goes, it is a sort of a weird patchwork thing. It propagates for a set amount of time at a set speed for 5 meters per second, I do believe, for a set amount of time. Now my build, if I'm not mistaken, has about 16 seconds of wave propagation, so that is about 80 meters. That's pretty sizable. That's pretty good. You will find the exact details of that in my links to Warframe Builder. You can see in the details section of that. Which also reminds me something. The wiki states that antimatter drop. I need to say this immediately. Antimatter drop is not affected by power range. This has been tested by me. And it is accurate. I have tested it with max range, I have tested it with negative range. Antimatter drop is not affected by power range. The secondary absorb bubble, the augment, is affected by power range, but antimatter drop itself, the explosion, is not affected by power range. So keep that in mind when you're building Nova. The Warframe Builder details will tell you that it is affected. This is not the case. Trust me, I have tested this thoroughly. Back to Molecular Prime. So we have wave propagation for a set amount of time at a set speed, and the power range you get on your Warframe does not affect the area that is affected by Molecular Prime. It affects only the secondary explosions caused by enemies dying while they are debuffed by Molecular Prime. This is kind of a throwaway these days. Sure, you can still make builds that are based on Molecular Prime damage. Certainly no fault in that. But my focus is the debuffs of Molecular Prime, which are much more useful in my opinion. So what are the debuffs? Enemies affected by Molecular Prime take double damage. Everyone can use this. This is double damage, just straight out double damage. No weird bullshit with adding on top of weapon damage mods or stuff like that. This just doubles the fucking damage. I hope. I'm not talking bullshit, am I? I'm pretty sure. Also, it has a slow effect. If you're using Speed Nova or Negative Nova, you will actually cause a haste effect, which is very deadly if you're not ready for it. Trust me. If you're in a map with Infested and you're using Speed Nova or Negative Nova and you're not ready for it, you're gonna get yes. But when you are doing a slow Nova or positive Nova, I'd say, but that's never used, you will debuff enemies so they are slow. The max slow is 75% slow, so they will move at 1/4 their speed, they will shoot at 1/4 their speed. This is part of my super awesome tacular preferred crowd control combo. Nova's molecular prime slow and damage debuff, and Loki's disarm, and Nyx's chaos. So you can really do a lot of work with that combo. So yes, I do choose to focus on the debuffs that molecular prime causes, and not so much on the damage. It will still do good damage, surprisingly enough. It will still do good damage, and it has that same potential of having several explosions affect enemies at the same time. If you kill 1 or 2 enemies, they will take surrounding enemies in the range of the blast will take damage from 2 explosions, and then they may die and chain react, which is still something that is to be considered. But primarily you will want molecular prime as a crowd control function. Either that or a speed up function, depending on your map, obviously. Now, like I said in the build, you can have gigantic duration of wave propagation, just gigantic, especially without fleeting expertise. With all the power duration mods slotted, you can have a gigantic wave propagation duration. Is it useful though? It depends on the size of the map. It really depends on the size of the map, so you have to experiment with this yourself. See what maps you like to play in, see how far molecular prime goes, and judge based on that. It's yeah, you have a lot of points where you can tweak Nova, and that is completely based on personal preference. Yes. So that's what I have to say about Nova's abilities. I hope I'm not forgetting anything, though I have the feeling that I'm forgetting something about molecular prime. Well, yes, there is an effect duration, that is how long they stay debuffed. That's not as consequential as other things. Now let's talk a little bit about weapon synergy. Weapon synergy for Nova is relatively simple. Like I said, get a Sentinel with the Guardian mod. I have fired up on my Sentinel, I don't know why, with a shotgun. Anyway, Guardian boosts owner's shields when it runs out. You absolutely want that in any shield based build. But regarding weapons, you want a weapon that has pinpoint accuracy, and hopefully, ideally, you don't want a beam weapon. I know it says so on the wiki, but you don't want a beam weapon because a beam weapon has a maximum range, and antimatter drop will go beyond that range fairly quickly. It's still an effective strategy, but I prefer, as I would say always, the bolt or prime. Also, have to stress this information that is publicly available. Critical hits will not affect how much damage is absorbed into antimatter drop. So don't take a critical based main hand weapon. Just take a weapon that does a lot of raw damage, like my bolt or prime. So you can charge antimatter drop the most. That is the primary weapon synergy you need with Nova. Otherwise, for Speed Nova, I have a specific recommendation. Instead of everything I just said, take the Phage. Enemies, specifically infested enemies, which is probably what you will be using Speed Nova for, will be funneled into a predictable approach. With the Phage, you can lay down a field, a literal field, if you don't narrow the beams, of damage at the approaching enemies, which will persist for a sizable amount of time. So, for example, if you're in a dark sector defense, which is where I found this out and where I tested this, you have that particular map where you are where the pod itself is mobile, so it has 2 positions. And the first position has one particular approach on one ramp. You can cast Molecular Prime as a speed nova. Enemies on the map will get sped up, and they will start charging you up that ramp. With Phage, you can just deny the ramp completely. You can detonate every enemy that comes that way, and those detonations will then add, of course, to the damage that is taken by the wave of enemies, and so on, and it will synergize very well with a speed nova build. So, like I was saying, Phage for speed nova, highly recommended, but still consider taking a secondary weapon that is pinpoint accurate and able to charge antimatter drop reliably and at longer ranges. Also, as a curiosity, in that particular dark sector defense map, there is a very high tower next to the second position of the pod, and with a wormhole that is not gimped by power range, you can actually get on top of that tower and thereby be immune to everything. The pod won't be immune, obviously, but you will be immune. So, for example, you can use that position and take advantage of another style of weapon synergy, a positional based weapon synergy. You can, for example, take a primary Ogress and just bomb everything beneath you. I would not recommend the Penta in that case, because the Penta might prove to be too inaccurate when you're firing from that high up. Okay, so what are my conclusions for Nova? A very interesting Warframe still. I really like her debuffs, I really like antimatter drop, I wish it was less buggy. I like Wormhole now that I'm forced to use it. I think it's okay, I think it's fun. Nullstar, still not a fan. You have a lot of points where you can tweak Nova, but if you've listened to my entire guide, bless you, you will probably have almost all the information that you need in order to start tweaking your Nova the way you like. And if you take anything from my guide, I hope it is that you will be able to find that specific Nova tweak that is right for you. So, thank you very much everyone for your continued interest in my Warframe guide series. Thank you very much for watching this particular build and guide video. Please consider subscribing or something. I don't know. I'm probably gonna have an annotation somewhere. I usually do. This has been Rexer of the YouTube and Twitch channel NotQuiteThereGaming. I have a lot of formaing left to do on Nova Prime, so I'm gonna sign off right now. Bye bye everyone, see you next time.